In this video, we'll try to understand the major developments that have happened across the domain of polity, IR, and possibly security in the last 1 week. So every Saturday, we'll have a lecture which will be covering the major developments across three domains. Why? Because newspaper importance has now been highlighted in this year UPSC Prelims examination. So we'll be covering that in depth from the preparation of both mains as well as what we call as that of prelims. So let us start our discussion with one of the topic that was the first news in this week, that is delimitation bill, where the government is planning to reintroduce the delimitation bill, but now it is also planning it to club the same with One Nation One Election bill. So let us understand what it is basically talking about, what they are trying to say. So the One Nation One Election as a concept, I have made a separate video on the same. If you want to go and watch it in detail, you can watch it. What is One Nation One Election, how it happens. Because it is a weekly revision, we'll understand what are the constitutional challenges that we'll face, what are the arguments in favor of One Nation One Election, and what are the arguments against the same. So we'll cover it from that perspective. A very brief summary, One Nation One Election means that the elections of state as well as the center will be conducted together simultaneously. It does not mean that the entire country will vote on one date. The voting will still be done in phases, but all the states and that of the center elections will be clubbed together. This is phase 1, and in phase 2, what will happen that within 100 days, the elections for local panchayats and the urban local bodies will also be done. Let us understand now what it basically highlights. The first is that of constitutional challenges. What are the constitutional challenges that we will face? The first challenge is that of special majority. To introduce One Nation One Election, special majority will be needed in the parliament. And if we look at the present parliament government disposition, there are less chances that the bill will be passed, because we have seen that the 131st Constitutional Amendment Bill was also defeated, which was regarding the women reservation and delimitation. So there are less chances that the opposition will allow the One Nation One Election bill to be passed. The second problem that is highlighted, second constitutional challenge that is highlighted, is the ratification dispute, and it is a major dispute. Why? The phase 1, which mixes the state election with that of center, the state says that ratification from the state are necessary under special majority type 2, where the state also give their majority ratified, 50% of the states also ratify the bill. But the center is of the opinion that since we are not changing the legislative, executive and financial distribution of power through this One Nation One Election bill, the state ratification is not needed. So this is a bone of contention, where both of them appears to be partially correct. Now who is perfectly correct will be determined ultimately by the Supreme Court if the case goes to that level. But this is a constitutional problem, whether the ratification of state is needed or not. States are saying, since it is fundamentally altering the procedure of the election, and also simultaneously it will change how the states will fill their seats in Rajya Sabha, so the state ratification is mandatory, while the center state, the state ratification is not required in phase 1. It will be required in phase 2. So this is problematic. Then the third problem is that of basic structure might get involved here. Why? Because Supreme Court in SR Bomai case has already explained that federalism is a part of basic structure, and now when the elections are to be conducted, suppose they are to be conducted together in 2029, a lot of state governments will not be able to complete their tenure and they will be subsumed within the national elections. This basically can go against the principle of federalism. This can be challenged by the states whose assemblies will be dissolved to conduct the simultaneous elections, and this ultimately can be struck down by Supreme Court, saying that it is violative of federalism and federalism is a part of basic structure. So this is another problem that we will face here. Then it comes with the regard of constitutional amendment. A constitutional amendment will be required. Changes will be seen in Article 356. It has also introduced some things like that of unexpired term. So what it will do, it will reduce the power of the state. It will fundamentally alter Article 356. It will reduce the tenure of a newly elected assembly if the assembly is dissolved earlier, only for the remainder of the term. all of that challenging the principles of the constitution altogether. So this is also to be seen how it will happen. Now, not only the changes will be in the constitution, but a lot of statutory overhaul changes will also be there, which we can see changes in the Representation of People Act, Model Code of Conduct will also require the changes, and it is just not only a constitutional amendment, but a lot of other amendments too will be there in this sense. So this is what we have to see. Now, after that, when we have seen constitutional problems, let us understand what are the arguments, why the government is so keen on pushing the concept of one nation, one election. Why the government is so keen on pushing the concept of one nation, one election. What are the arguments in favor? The first argument that is highlighted in favor is that it will lower the cost. It will lower the cost. For example, Election Commission of India had a cost of 4,500 crore involved in the last elections that were conducted. And this is a recurring cost. This cost further amplifies when the elections are conducted for various states. And every year, we will have some odd states that will be fighting what we call as elections. So the government of India is saying that the fiscal pressure will decline once the elections are conducted for central and state government together for a period of 5 years. So this is a logical rationale. Secondly, they also highlight that it is just a government estimate. It is just the government cost. But if we go by the studies done by the individual reports, the last elections, the 2024 elections that India faced, it involved a total cost of 1.35 lakh crore, which also highlights a lot of black money. So if the elections are conducted together, at least the cost or the black money involved in the state elections will be dropped significantly. So this is one of the rationale that it reduces the cost. Second is governance continuity. What happens that whenever the elections are announced, Model Code of Conduct comes into play. The date of announcement of elections, from that time, Model Code of Conduct comes into picture. And what it happens that the government can now not take majority decision or major policy decision. It ultimately decreases what? It ultimately decreases the power of the government to basically implement their reforms or policies. So this policy paralysis arises due to multiple elections and imposition of Model Code of Conduct. So this problem will also be solved. Then there is also what we call as efficient machinery. Efficient machinery utilization will also happen. Why? Because whenever the elections are conducted, you will see that the teachers are called from their duty. Their primary duty is to teach. The CRPF or what we call as the Reserve Police Forces or Central Armed Police Forces are called to conduct the elections. Their primary duty is to provide for security. But because of multiple elections, they are not able to perform their primary duty. So once the elections will be conducted simultaneously, they will be free and they will be performing the primary duty for which they have been recruited for and for which they are capable of. Not for the duty that they are called off because of lack of resources or lack of people that will be doing or implementing this job. Then historical turnout will also be high. The historical data shows that once the nation's election are clubbed with the state election, for the states that have gone with their election along with that of national elections, the voter turnout is significantly higher. It increases from 17 to 21% when the elections are clubbed. So higher voter turnout means more enriched democracy, more vibrant democracy. So voter turnout will also increase, which has been the official goal of the government. And it will also lead to cleaner finance. I have also told you this earlier also that 1.35 lakh crore was the cost involved, and this was fueling the black money. This will be removed since the elections will be now conducted once in every 5 years. So the cost will significantly decline, reducing the culture of black money, muscle power in the elections. And at the last, it will also provide a much needed economic stability as the high level committee, the Ramnath Kovind committee, which was formed and which basically highlighted that on the recommendations were accepted by the government also, and 2 bills were introduced for the elections. It highlights that there is a potential gain of 1.5% of GDP that may be seen if elections are conducted together. So it will contribute to the better fiscal management of the country and significantly contribute to the GDP of the country. So it is also a rationale. But there are also arguments that are against the one nation, one elections. Let us also see what are the arguments against one nation, one election. What are the arguments against? The critics highlight that the cost is overstated. Critics highlight that the cost is overstated, that The expenditure on elections is already very less. It is just contributing 0.02 to 0.1% of the union budget. So this is not a very significant cost. The cost is very less as compared to that of cost of accountability. Elections are equivalent to accountability, where the people will hold their representative accountable. So even if it involves a cost, of 4,500 crores, this is important. Why? Because that is when the leaders are responsible and accountable to the people. So we cannot snatch away this accountability just because it is a costly process, and the cost is also very less. So this is the first argument that they make. Then they highlight that the paralysis problem might not be solved altogether, because there can be a situation the state government might not be able to complete its tenure and might be dissolved earlier because of the loss of confidence of majority in the house. Okay. Then new elections, midterm elections will be conducted for the unexpired term. Okay. Then also model code of conduct will be followed. So model code of conduct is coming in picture, and it will again lead to policy paralysis. It will again stop the government from taking major decisions. So what does it highlight? That the problem will still remain. It is not completely eradicated, or it is just shoved under the carpet. So this is another problem. Then critics also highlight that it goes against the principle of federalism and basic structure. We have already seen that a lot of state governments will not be able to complete their complete tenure if the elections are mixed before 2029. So it is violative of basic structure. This was the constitutional challenge also, and this goes against the principle of federalism. So critics have highlighted that India is a federal country and the principles of federalism are being violated. Then another problem is that when we see at the voter behavior, when we look at the voter behavior, what do we highlight? When we look at the voter behavior, we get to know that when the national elections and state elections are done together, 77% of the people will vote for the same political party at a national and the state level. But once they are not done together, when they are separately, only 48% of the people will vote for the same political party. What does this highlight? That the regional parties have a better picture if the elections are not conducted together. So what do we want to value? It has to be seen. Then the last thing is weaker accountability, because one nation, one election is what method? One nation, one election will ensure that it will only happen once 5 years. So how will we keep our leaders accountable? And also the argument highlighted is that who is talking about the logistic cost? Why? Because okay, if we go for one nation, one election together, then we will need a new EVMs and VVPATs. Because what currently happens, if once the elections are conducted in one place, the same EVMs and VVPATs are utilized in the other place. But once you go for one nation, one election, same EVMs and VVPATs cannot be used. So there will be a significant one-time cost that will be involved to procure this EVMs and VVPAT. No one is talking about that. Secondly, there will be also a cost of replacement of these EVMs and VVPATs every 10 to 15 years. And it will also come close to 10,000 crore rupees. No one is talking about that. So the potential benefit that we see in the form of cost reduced is lost, and it basically loses its merit when we look at the accountability parameter and when we also look at the cost parameter. So one nation, one election should be implemented or not, it is a thing that should be done gradually, partially. It should be started as a pilot project, and it should be done when all the major political parties are on the same picture, when all the stakeholders involved are on the same picture. So this should be your way forward for this. Now, the next important article that got covered and that got featured this week was regarding the visit of the Myanmar's head towards India. And the Myanmar's head basically visited India during this time period. And he clearly highlighted that he won't allow the territory of Myanmar to be used for anti-Indian activities. Anti-Indian activities will not be allowed from the Myanmar territories. He also reassured the Indian Prime Minister that they will also target the Northeast insurgents. Prime Minister Modi also highlighted that Myanmar is key. So what was the major statement? Let us see what are the major statements. What are the recent visit concluded? Prime Minister Modi highlighted that Myanmar is of critical importance for India. It is a neighbor with whom that we share a border, and also it is in the confluence of our neighborhood first diplomacy, Act East diplomacy, as well as Mahasagar and Indo-Pacific policies, highlighting the critical role of Myanmar. Myanmar president also stopped over in Bodh Gaya. What does this stoppage highlight? What is this? Why is this stoppage is symbolic? Because it highlights the deep-rooted cultural ties where there is a common link of Buddhism, which highlights strong people-to-people ties. So Buddhism is a cultural link between India and Myanmar. It is a part of what we call the soft diplomacy. So it is also significant. The Prime Minister conveyed that the Mekong Ganga ICCR scholarship for Myanmar students will also be increased. So this highlights the India's effort in capacity development. So these were the major developments in Myanmar. But through this article, let us understand 2-3 things. One, what is the importance of Myanmar for India? Second, what are the things that India has done for Myanmar? And third, what are the challenges that India faces with respect to Myanmar? So we'll see it in 3 frames. Let us start with the importance of Myanmar for India. Let us see what are the importance of Myanmar for India. And we'll see all of them. What is the importance of Myanmar for India? The first importance is that of strategic location. Myanmar sits at the tri-junction of South Asia, Southeast Asia and East Asia. It is the only ASEAN nation that we share a border with. It is critical for our neighborhood diplomacy, neighborhood first policy. It is important for our Act East diplomacy. It is also important for our connectivity. So this is a critical area where Myanmar is of importance. It is the only ASEAN nation sharing land border with India. And it is a gateway to the Southeast Asia under Act East policy and neighborhood first policy. So it is a gateway to ASEAN. India has invested tremendously in Myanmar. And the major project that India has invested into is Kaladan multimodal transit and transport project. The Kaladan multimodal transit and transport project will serve 2 benefits. India has also invested in India-Myanmar-Thailand highway. These 2 projects will serve 2 purposes. Not only it will increase India's connectivity to the Southeast Asian states, but it will also solve the problem when India will be better connected with its northeastern states, bringing in development to the northeast. So India, it is gateway to ASEAN and provides trade connectivity. India has become Myanmar's 4th largest export market and 5th largest import partner. Then Myanmar is also very important for what we call as countering the China imperative. China has invested heavily in Myanmar. China has basically de facto control over the Kachin state. Now this Kachin state is very close to the border of Arunachal Pradesh. China has also invested heavily, we'll also see that in detail when we highlight the issues, in Kyukyu port as an alternative to India's investment in the Sitwe port. To counter India's investment in the Sitwe port is a critical component of the Kaladan multimodal transit and transport project. So what is happening that China, there have been, the reports have highlighted that China is pursuing allegedly what we call as string of pearls. It is not an official government of India word. So we will not use these words in the exam. We'll try to avoid it. And even if we use it, we'll drop it on scholars. Scholars have highlighted that it is string of pearls where China is trying to encircling India by having deep sea ports across the Indian territories like that in Pakistan, Gwadar port, or in Sri Lanka, Hambantota port, or in Myanmar, what we call as Kyukyu port, also in Bangladesh. So this is another problem that we have. We have to counter the Chinese imperative. Myanmar is also important for India in critical mineral partnership. These critical minerals are found in the Kachin state, and India has invested close to $700 million for exploration of these critical minerals. China is also looking for exploration of these critical minerals. Now, critical minerals are a thing that India has no access to in India. So we are dependent on the foreign imports. If we are able to explore this partnership with Myanmar, India will reduce its dependence of critical minerals that particularly we are dependent on China. So it is very important for critical mineral partnership, and critical minerals are basically the minerals which are what we call as a critical component of every modern day machinery, which basically is your mobile phones, semiconductor chips, defense equipments, electronic goods, etc. Everything is dependent on these critical minerals. So if we can explore this partnership, it is also beneficial for India. Northeast Development Anchor, I have already told you that Northeast India is landlocked. We are trying to explore an alternative through Myanmar through the Kaladan Multimodal Transit and Transport Project, for which we have developed a rail-road link along with the sea link with Myanmar. It will basically bring much needed development to the Northeast and solve the problem of secessionism that Myanmar faces. India also has cultural and civilizations link. There is intertribal contiguity. If you see that there is a strong connection between the Chin community of Myanmar and that of the community in Kuki community in India. So we have intertribal contiguity. We have already seen Buddhism is also a link, and we also had something called as free movement regime to promote this intertribal contiguity and people to people ties. So all of this highlights the importance of Myanmar for India. Now let us see what India has done for Myanmar. The economic trade has reached basically close to $2.1 billion, and India and Myanmar also have a rupee kyat trade settlement mechanism. The bilateral exchange in national currency, so we are not dependent on any other foreign country for a trade between us. And the Myanmar's partnership with India has reached to $2.15 billion. So this is steadily increasing. India has invested close to $1.75 billion. We have invested in Sitwe Port. In Sitwe Port, it is a component of Kaladan multimodal transit and transport project. So we have developed Sitwe Port in the Rakhine state of Myanmar. We have developed Re-Tidim Road. We have developed Kalewa Yargi Road. So these roads have Re-Tidim Road, Kalewa Yargi Road, Tamu Kalewa Road, Sitwe Port. All of this has been developed by India in Myanmar to give a boost to the connectivity and also to ensure India's connectivity to its northeast. Then we have also developed IMT highway, Trilateral bridge between India, Myanmar and Thailand, further increasing our connectivity with the northeastern states and also with what we called as that of Southeast Asian state. We have also helped them in defense collaboration. We have something called as Operation Sunrise and Operation Sunshine that we have with Myanmar, in which we have countered what we called as the insurgent groups like that of ULFA and NSCN. These ULFA and NSCN were the secessionist group targeting Indian security forces and then running deep into the Myanmar territories. But in collaboration with the Myanmar security forces, what we have done, particularly with the Junta regime, we have been able to counter them and ensure that no safe haven is provided to the NSCN insurgents or that of what we called as ULFA in that state. Then we have also provided them with training and we have also provided them with the bilateral military and naval exercises. India has also provided what we called as first responder to any kind of disaster that Myanmar has faced under Operation Sadbhav and Operation Brahma. So we have been the first responder. These are called as, what you will write it as, these are called as HADR operation, Humanitarian Assistance and Disaster Relief. HADR, Humanitarian Assistance and Disaster Relief. So India is a first responder in providing HADR operations, humanitarian assistance and disaster relief. And then we have also contributed to the capacity building. We have developed Myanmar Institute of Information Technology in collaboration with IIIT Bangalore. We have developed their Advanced Center for Agriculture Research. We have developed their Rice Biopark. We also have developed training centers, and we have given scholarship to the Myanmari students studying into India, for which recently Prime Minister Modi has announced that it will be further increased. So this is what India's capacity development with respect to Myanmar has been done. But this does not mean that everything is good between India and Myanmar. There are also some problems that have been faced, or the challenges that India and Myanmar faces. Some issues are bilateral, some issues are due to involvement of China, where China is trying to encircle India. The first major challenge that India saw was the takeover by the military junta regime, where the democratically established government of Aung San Suu Kyi was put under house arrest and was removed. After that, what has happened? Myanmar has faced global isolation. When Myanmar has faced global isolation, Myanmar has been driven closer to what we call as China, because it is facing global isolation and China does not follow any standard rules of agreement, so they are engaging close with the junta regime. So India now found itself as a crossroads, whether India should be realist and engage with what we called as the junta regime, which is the current reality in Myanmar, or whether India should be following its idealistic foreign policy and support the democratically elected government of Myanmar. So this is a first challenge that India faced, that how should we proceed further, because one stand will dilute our idealist stand and the other stand will be diluting our realist stand. So India needs to find a fine balance. Then second problem is that our connectivity projects are stuck. IMT highway project was launched 10 years before, but it has still seen a completion of 70% only. and Kaladan Multimodal Transit and Transport Project, where the Sitwe port is located. It is located in Rakhine State. And Rakhine State is basically the state where the Myanmar faces the largest problem. So what does this highlight? What does all of this highlight? That the Kaladan Multimodal Transit and Transport Project or the IMT Highway project is nowhere near the completion. And partly it is because of the delays, and mostly it is because of the internal security situation of Myanmar, where the Junta regime is fighting against the armed organizations of Myanmar. So it is also problematic. Then India in the past has cancelled the free movement regime, because this free movement regime was creating the issues of smuggling. This was creating the issues of what we called as problems in the internal security of India, particularly in the state of Manipur. So what we have done, we have cancelled the free movement regime. Now this was a long agreement between India and Myanmar, wherein visa-free access was provided to the people of both the countries, so that the people and people ties can be further increased and inter-tribal contiguity can be maintained. But now this has also been removed, so this is also problematic. Then another problem was Rohingya crisis. Rohingya Muslims were basically persecuted in the Buddhist regime of Myanmar, or what we called as the Buddhism under the regime of Aung San Suu Kyi. And these Rohingya crisis has led to the people or Rohingya migrants fleeing Myanmar and entering into the territories of India. There are 40,000 odd Rohingya Muslims who are basically living as immigrants in India, and this raises a security concern for India. Further, it also creates our bilateral problem with Bangladesh, because when India tried to stop the Rohingya Muslims, these people entered into Bangladesh, and it created diplomatic issue between India and Bangladesh, where Bangladesh was highlighting that because of the stiff measures that India is taking, the Rohingya Muslims that are fleeing from Myanmar are entering into Bangladesh. So it creates not only a diplomatic issue with Myanmar, but it creates an issue with our other neighbor, what is called as Bangladesh also. So this is also problematic. Then what we called as, there is transnational security threats. Now these are also called as non-traditional security threats. These are also called as non-traditional security threats. This includes smuggling, arms smuggling. See, Myanmar is notoriously known for a country which is a part of Golden Triangle, and Golden Triangle is a region which is notorious for cultivation of opium and other synthetic drugs. And from these areas, because we have a border with Myanmar, these synthetic drugs enter into the Indian economy, not only destroys the youth, but also generates a parallel economy, a black economy. And the proceeds of this black economy will be utilized or are being utilized by the insurgent groups to target Indian security forces, thus creating a security pressure for India. So these are non-traditional security threats. Myanmar has also in the recent times emerged as a critical area from which gold is being smuggled into India, and some reports suggest that 20 to 25 of all the imported gold that is done through black channels comes from Myanmar. So this is a problem. Arms imports, drugs import, gold import. So these are non-traditional security concerns that we see. And lastly, there is China factor. China has basically approved of investing close to $21 billion in Myanmar as a part of CMEC. So with Pakistan, China has CPEC, that is China-Pakistan Economic Corridor. Now it is also planning CMEC, China-Myanmar Economic Corridors, and it has already started the same, where China has promised to invest close to $21 billion. It has de facto control of the Kachin state. It has developed Kyaukphyu port. It has invested heavily into connecting Mandalay with Kunming. It has also re-established the link of oil refineries and oil connection. It is already exploring critical minerals from the Kachin state. And this is basically what we see as encirclement. So what China has done, let us see. Kyaukphyu deep sea port in the Bay of Bengal region, Sino-Myanmar oil and gas pipeline, Mandalay-Kunming railway, and Sitwe-Kunming route. All Sitwe port is of India's port, and they are trying to undercut India's power here. So what it is doing, basically they are undercutting India's investment in this region, and India is apprehensive of Chinese designs in the Indian Ocean region, and particularly in that of Myanmar. And recently a big breakthrough was being achieved by China, where China brokered a ceasefire between the Junta regime and the Myanmar National Democratic Alliance Army. So this is when China is also influencing and increasing its diplomatic footprint in Myanmar by brokering a peace deal in a country where the two factions are fighting with each other. So what does it highlight? That China is not only taking the advantage of the isolation that Myanmar faces due to the world, but it is also increasing its diplomatic footprint and its role as a stability provider in Myanmar by brokering a peace deal between two warring factions in Myanmar. So not only India is getting challenged from its involvement, its neighbor being involved in Myanmar. And the last problem that India faces is that the economic partnership between India and Myanmar is still very less. It is only $2.15 billion. And it has been stagnant. It is not increasing. So we need to promote people-to-people ties. We need to promote business-to-business ties to make the India-Myanmar partnership or to take India-Myanmar partnership to the next level. So these were the challenges. These were the importance. These were what India has done and what was this seen in the recent times. So this was about India and Myanmar. Now let us see the last article, which basically is an article related to that of prelims. Now let us see what it's saying. The article mentions that the United Nations General Assembly will vote to elect its next president. Now they are talking about president. They are not talking about Secretary General. Understand, there is a difference between United Nations General Assembly president and that of Secretary General. These two are not similar posts. A lot of people get confused, and this can be asked in your prelims examination next year. We are covering topics from both prelims as well as mains perspective. So what do we see here? The President of the United Nations General Assembly is elected. So President is elected annually by which majority? By simple majority. The first thing that you need to do is that they are elected by all the 193 members by simple majority. Where are these things specified? They are specified in Rule 30 of the UN General Assembly Rules of Procedure. So United Nations General Assembly President is elected every single year by simple majority, and where the rule is written? Rule is written in the Rule 30 of the UNGA Rules of Procedure. Then there is also something called as regional rotation. There are 5 major regions that have been specified, which includes that of African states, Asia Pacific states, Eastern European countries, Latin American and Caribbean states, and Western European and other states. So the seats are rotated every year in these 5 regions. The seats are rotated every year in these 5 regions. So elections are every year, and the seats are also rotated in across these 5 regions. So they have a 1-year term. The president serves a non-renewable. The term is non-renewable 1-year term. And what is the role? The main thing is that of role. How it is different from Secretary General. So what is written? The President of UNGA serves as the Chief Presiding Officer and Moderator of the 193 member body. Secretary General manages the administrative execution, and the Security Council handles the global enforcement. So Secretary General basically manages what? Administrative execution. While the UNGA President, what is UNGA President doing? It basically provides powers of diplomacy, agenda setting, and consensus building. So what is UNGA President doing ultimately? The President opens, suspends, and closes all formal assembly sessions. So he is just sitting and presiding over the proceedings of UNGA. This is the role that has to be done by the UNGA President. So we have read about UNGA President. He is elected every year. He is elected for a period of 1 year only. This term is non-renewable. He is elected by a simple majority of all the UNGA members, and what is his role? Is to basically preside over the sittings and the meetings of UNGA. The Secretary General basically goes for administrative execution, and United Nations Security Council basically goes for global enforcement. So these were all the major topics of this week coming from Polity and IR section. I have made one more video where I have highlighted how drones are seen as a new paradigm in the warfare. Do watch that video also. That was also in this week's newspaper. But since I have covered that topic extensively, I do not want to waste your time in this again. So do watch that video, how drones have altered, or drones are the new paradigm in the warfare technique, such that you will also understand about a topic of GS3, which might be asked in your upcoming mains examination. Let us meet next week and continue our journey of what are the important articles that are getting covered. Thank you.